And in that moment, I was like, this could be a problem because I knew enough by that point to know not many people understood about the technology. And there was absolutely no laws governing it because we know the speed at which legislation is developed. And the legislators don't even understand it. So we're in the Wild West. There's a lot of ways this could go really, really wrong. And that started to concern me because I began to feel like people need to know about this. We need to have some rules around this. And maybe in my small way, I can just help people understand this better so that they can navigate this a little bit more clearly.
This is Shed Talk. All right, folks, buckle up. And in today's episode of Shed Talk with Kevin Halliday, we are talking about AI. But don't worry, we're not talking about garbled stuff that's really hard to understand. We're actually bringing in a great guest today is Rebecca Bultsma. She has made it her life to make AI practical, approachable, and most importantly, ethical. Rebecca has empowered thousands across Canada and the United States to embrace AI with confidence while always keeping human relationships at the forefront. You know what? I'm excited about this episode. Let's deep dive in with Rebecca. Thanks for joining me on Shed Talk.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Kevin.
It is absolutely wonderful to have you here because what was really interesting, we were talking yesterday and your name had come up and about AI. And everybody, it's like AI, social media, the internet. And when we talk about these types of activities, like, say, the internet, and they say it's a disruptor, the internet disrupt the world, it's going to change everything. All of a sudden, here we fast forward to AI, the problems, the scarcity, what people are thinking. Now, here's the perfect person that knows AI inside and out. Let's deep dive it.
Let's talk about it. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
So why is everyone scared of AI?
It's a complicated question, but I think it boils down to not understanding enough about it and the future being so uncertain. And then all the dystopian Hollywood movies we've all seen that kind of have preformed how we think about AI. But in reality, we've been using AI for 30 years without even really knowing it. Your very first Hotmail or Yahoo account used artificial intelligence to filter spam out of your inbox. It got really good at recognizing, this is from someone who's offering to send me $1 million from Nigeria, or, because a prince relative died, and it learned through patterns what was spam and what was not spam. So we've been using artificial intelligence for a really long time. It's been around for a really long time.
So it's interesting. You say it's been around for a long time. Okay, so this is where I come into play, and I'm asking because this question is that everybody in the world can say, okay, where were you the day of 9/11? Okay, as an example, okay, the disruptor of 9/11. You know where? I know exactly where I was at 9/11. I know exactly what happened. I know that day, that fork in the road that changed my life that day. Now, kind of like COVID at the same time. But now take AI, when all of a sudden, do you remember the first day and that feeling you got when you were first introduced to AI?
Yes, it was November 2022. And really, that was the day the whole world changed. Just people might not have been aware of it at the time, but there was a tech company called OpenAI, and they launched what they expected to be a low-key research preview of a product they'd been working on called ChatGPT. And they released it with one tweet. That was their whole marketing strategy. And it was a tweet from Sam Altman that said, we just launched a new project. Check it out here. The night before, they had actually thought that maybe the tweet would get 5,000 likes. It was a low-key research preview. And then ChatGPT hit 1 million users in 5 days, which is a record for any sort of social platform. Instagram, it took 2.5 months, and that was pretty quick. And then it hit 100 million users within 5 or 6 weeks, and now they're at 200 million users, and it's just blown up exponentially. But this was a different type of AI, and that's what really made the difference. This is, and I'm not alone in thinking this, the technology that is more disruptive than the internet, than steam power, than any of these really, really high-functioning, life-changing, multi-purpose technologies we've ever seen.
So when you first saw it and it came over and you just gave me that kind of like that rundown right there, what was going through your head? Because you obviously didn't think of it as a business at that point.
No. The only way I can describe it is it hit my curiosity palette perfectly. I have had a career that specializes in communications, professional communications, public relations, marketing, and so I love words. And I realized right away that this was a technology that was fully controlled through effective communication. The better you were at speaking in natural language and giving instructions to this thing, this ChatGPT, the better it was at doing things for you. And I was fascinated. And I've always been a productivity junkie. I've bought every full focus planner and strategy and app and everything. And I realized this was going to be a combination of productivity and words, two things that I loved. And I was just instantly hooked. And I wanted to learn as much about it as I could, but there was nobody talking about it. Nobody knew about it. It wasn't released with an instruction manual. And so I just started figuring it out and then sharing with other people what I was learning as I went along and following other people as they went along.
So how did you deep dive it?
I just spent a lot of time with it.
So you spent basically just tons of time
Yeah.
researching. Well, you couldn't really research.
Yeah, there was nothing out there. It was weird. Every single task I had to do in a day, I thought, I wonder if ChatGPT could help me with this. And I would try, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it was an epic fail. And I'd find a few other people who was doing that too, and I would try things that they were recommending. I would read research as it came out and try and apply some of the prompting strategies. And then as new products came out, I would try them. New features, I would try them. And I bought some books early on that talked about kind of the history of AI. One called Genius Makers by Cade Metz is one of my all-time favorites. And it gave me the backstory. And there was a story specifically within that book and a documentary that I watched that really, really hooked me. It's called AlphaGo. It's an award-winning documentary. And it's free on YouTube. I think it might be on Netflix here and there, but it really, really got me hooked. The story of kind of the very first time society saw a machine that could do things better than a human on a massive scale.
So that changing point, that aha moment that happened, okay, and I know the time you said that time, but when you started doing your research, when did that moment in time come that goes, holy crow, this is where it's going to begin? Now, at that point, and I'm getting back into something, it's like you opened up the Pandora box, Terminator. That's the first thing that goes through everybody's head. Oh no, we've just created this. And I'm assuming you saw that same thing. Whoa, this is this, but looking at it a different way. What point in time was that particular instance? And when I'm talking about the instance, is like, yes, you're doing your research. Yes, you're deep diving stuff. But when was that aha moment? Like, this is big.
I remember the exact moment. It was the release of a technology by a company called HeyGen, and the founder released a video that was a perfect deepfake of himself speaking, and you could not tell that it wasn't him. He was walking and he said, I'm going to switch to Spanish. And it was his voice, him walking, and it immediately switched from language to language to language in his voice with his likeness, but it wasn't real. And in that moment, I was like, this could be a problem, because I knew enough by that point to know not many people understood about the technology, and there was absolutely no laws governing it, because we know the speed at which legislation is developed, and the legislators don't even understand it. So we're in the Wild West. There's a lot of ways this could go really, really wrong. And that started to concern me, because I began to feel like people need to know about this. We need to have some rules around this. And maybe in my small way, I can just help people understand this better so that they can navigate this a little bit more clearly and at least know that these kind of deepfakes are out there and prepare themselves for this and any other risks that might come up.
And it's interesting because you just mentioned right there, okay, so the risk and debunking it and making sure. Now you get into politics and you go back, and then all of a sudden it kind of correlates with fake news.
Oh, totally. There's definitely a correlation. Everything's kind of led us to this point. Obviously, social media and the nature of social media. I read something interesting last week that said the mis and disinformation problem could have been solved years ago with one simple action by Facebook, which was to remove the share button. If people, it was harder for them to share information by copying and pasting, they wouldn't do it. But if at the click of a button, you can spread something that's not true and spread it to 1,000 people, and then 1,000 people can spread it to 1,000 people. And Meta knew that and chose not to do it. But it was interesting to me that we found ourselves in this ecosystem now. And then the latest term is this idea of AI slop, because there's so much AI generated content out there that's murky and filling up our social media platforms. And it's just this slop that has no nutritional content. We saw the perfect example of it during the recent hurricanes in Florida. There was a picture circulating of a girl crying in a boat in the rain, clutching a puppy. And it went viral. It was shared millions of times by senators and by celebrities. And it turned out that it was a fake photo. And FEMA and the people involved in the disaster relief efforts had to be fielding phone calls about, why aren't you doing more? Look at this poor little girl. Is this girl okay? And combating mis and disinformation than focusing on the actual relief efforts. And so we're seeing this nature of this idea of mis and disinformation creeping in and actually impacting us in the real world. But now it's powered by AI, and there's more of it than ever.
And then how do you govern that?
That's the million-dollar question. We have not been very successful as a society in governing social media in general, which is why we've ended up where we are with teenage girls with major mental health problems and people trapped in these echo chambers that are highly polarizing. And so I hope that AI, in all of its brilliant ability to make connections, will maybe help us solve some of those trickier problems. But I think things are probably going to be worse before they get better. It's really going to be a matter of helping people develop AI literacy and digital literacy better, because the people who are spreading the misinformation are people from our generation, because we didn't learn about digital literacy when we were in school. There was no internet. So nobody taught us about how to identify deepfakes or check sources. And so we're the people who are perpetuating the spread of mis and disinformation. And something needs to happen to help us be better educated so that we can spot those things.
And it's kind of like, I guess we need to age ourselves out and the new generation steps in because it seems like when all of a sudden it's like any trend or anything that's being introduced, the pendulum swings. It goes all of a sudden, something's introduced, it goes far to the left and then it bounces back to the right. Then it finally finds its place in the middle and says, okay, we're finally here. 10, 20, 50 years later, then we've kind of have a routine in it. So you mentioned here, as when you were getting into it, about being the educator and basically having it being governed. Because as soon as you started, you recognized there has to be rules here. Mm-hmm. And being in the education system, and then from kids from 0 to 12, how was that implicated with you? Like, what was that first approach to have you start that? Because you did recognize that there has to be rules. What were the rules?
There still aren't a lot of rules. We have existing rules that we all have to operate within as a society, right? Like, don't be dishonest. And that kind of covers the idea of deep fakes and fraud. We have these existing rules. It just hasn't been very clear on the application of them. Where it gets blurry is things like kids using AI to do their homework or write their essays, right? The teachers are like, that's plagiarism. And it's not really plagiarism because it's brand new content. It's not copied and pasted off the internet, but it's still cheating. That's just not super defined. And so some schools have tried to completely block it or use these AI detectors that absolutely do not work. There's actually parents suing school systems in the US for giving their kid a 0 on an essay because it was flagged as AI generated, when in reality, you cannot detect AI generated writing. It's just not possible. So it's interesting to watch. How we think about education is going to have to fundamentally change. And that will be a conversation for people much more important than me. But I just kind of started off with the people I knew best, which was the communicators and the people who were in charge of disseminating information to the communities, making sure that those people understood a little bit more. And then I speak to groups of leaders because I feel strongly that leaders should lead from the front and lead by example and fully understand this technology before they can start making decisions about how it's governed within a system. So
interesting. And where I'm taking some more value out of this is the value prop is that you have this thing called the AI Oreo strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. And I went through it and I went through it a couple times and I looked at it and read it and I went, okay, that actually makes sense about curiosity, creating curiosity. And if you want to explain a little bit more about that, because it actually opened a whole new Pandora box and gave me that one aha moment. So I'll let you explain a little bit more about that.
Well, I really think that using something like ChatGPT, an AI tool for writing, is the least interesting way to use it. I know how to write. I've written my whole life, and so I don't like AI to write my content for me. And how I suggest people approach an AI tool is to use it for the first 20% or that top of your Oreo to get you started on a project as a thought partner. So help me brainstorm ideas, help me understand every perspective of this issue, help me identify the key areas of focus. Here's something I wrote, tell me where I should take it next. And using AI for that 25%, 20 to 25% to get you started, and then getting what you can out of AI, moving to a completely new platform. Take it into Word, take it into Google Docs, somewhere fresh where it's yours to work on. And you're the white stuff in the middle of that mega stuffed Oreo, and you make it special. You make it your own. You add your domain expertise and wisdom, because that's where AI lacks ability, is contextual awareness and wisdom, this idea that we gain wisdom through lived experience and nuance. So you apply that to whatever you're developing. And then at the end, that last 20%, take it back to AI and say, act as if you were the target audience or my boss and evaluate this and tell me what questions you would have. Or identify this through the lens of this stakeholder and tell me how it makes you feel. We're using AI as that last set of eyes where you can say, give me feedback. How does this sound? How can I make this better? And so starting and finishing, but really that important meat in the middle, needs to be human so that it's authentic.
Yeah, and when I looked at that, it kind of created curiosity to ask a better question. It's going, well, wait a second, I'm curious, got it. But I'm able to use AI in a sense that I never had to worry about an assistant before or someone checking my emails. So now I have the AI does that for me. And it's like having that, you have the little guy on your shoulder he's right there now all the time saying, okay, well, I just got to ask a better question. And it prompts me to ask a better question so I can deep dive a better answer. So it's been a very, very uplifting approach with chat. Well, obviously ChatGPT prompts and stuff, but I only know the small part of it. So when we talk about chat, so let's get down to the bigger part of it. Yes, it can help you with writing. It helps with your social media. It gives you that. But where's that next level of in business or as an individual? Because you've started at the bottom with it, and you've gone and you've seen the progression and where it's going. Where's that aha in the middle there?
Oh, there's always a new aha in the middle somewhere. ChatGPT is still the best kind of large language model, multimodal AI out there. For people who are just starting to use it, there's a free version and there's a paid version. You get the same quality of AI in both. You'll just, after interacting with the free version for a while, it'll tell you to come back later. You'll run out of interactions. It's $20 a month. I'd probably pay $500 a month if they wanted it. Honestly, it's the most incredible tool I've ever used. But you have the ability within the settings to tell it all about yourself, what you like and what you don't like and what you do for a living, and to remember things about you that make it so that you don't have to remind it every single time, which I love. On the mobile app, there's a really high quality voice feature that makes it sound like you're talking to an actual real person, and it sounds incredibly realistic. So sometimes I'll go for a walk and ask GPT to be a thought partner for me on a specific topic, or assume the role of a debate partner to help me see every side of an issue, or try and develop empathy for somebody else's point of view, or to even be a thought partner if I give it a complicated issue and have it argue with me and evaluate my arguments on the issue. So really using it as that voice thought partner. But then things like from the app, you can take a picture of your fridge and say, give me 20 ideas of what I can make for dinner based on what's in my fridge right now. And it can see and tell you, do I have the tool that I need to do this thing? Here's a picture of my toolbox. Yep, third tool down on the right. You can use this. There's also within ChatGPT something called the GPT Store. And it's kind of like the App Store, but for ChatGPT, full of personalized little mini GPTs that are great at doing specific things that you don't even have to prompt. They're already prompted for you. For example, there's one that's called Plantly. You can take a picture of your house and say, what type of plant would thrive here? What type of plant is this? Why is my plant sick? And it can see and evaluate. There's one that will design your tattoo and give you a mock-up on your body. There's one that's prepared to generate you a lesson plan or act as Napoleon Bonaparte and answer questions. There's millions, and people can make them, or you can make your own. And so all of these interesting functionalities, one of the probably best ones that sets it apart from other large language models, ChatGPT, is the data analysis capabilities. And so you can give it some images of some data. You could give it tons of spreadsheets, a few PDFs. You could give it pictures of stuff you'd written on the back of a napkin. And one thing generative AI is amazing at is it finding connections between all different bits of information. So you could give it all that information and say, find the trends, or what do you notice about this data? Or what does this data say about this versus this? And you can ask questions indefinitely of your data, and it's super accessible. Same with 50, 60-page documents. Suddenly, if you don't have time to read that, or you have a reading disability or some sort of a limitation that makes it so that was not accessible to you before, everyone now has democratized access to information that previously wasn't available to them. Maybe I didn't understand quantum physics on this, 10,000-page scientific journal. Now I can give that to an AI system and say, explain this to me like I'm 10, and suddenly I have access to that information that never would have been available to me before. So that's something that's kind of great about ChatGPT, but there's other platforms that all do really great things. There's kind of 4 or 5 that I talk about the most for large language models, but ChatGPT is still the best.
So you've mentioned all these things in there. And this is what it does, this is what it does, this is what it is. It's all that in a bag of chips. Okay, we've got everybody there. All right, so here I am. I'm thinking, wow, this is great. This is great. So here we are in a population, all of a sudden the 1% of 1%, and I'm looking at who actually uses ChatGPT, okay? Is it the 1% that are using it? Okay, now, and I mean using it to its full potential. Like right now, what you had mentioned to me, I thought I was pretty good at it. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm using it for this. But when you just opened up the Pandora box and just said, okay, it does all this, I'm going, oh my gosh, over my head. Not that it was hard, it's hard to do, but now it's over my head. How do you implement process to do?
That's a great question. There's a kind of a little bit of a framework that I recommend. And it really starts with, if you're using it professionally, the first thing I recommend is to list everything you do as part of your job. And there's actually a mini GPT that already does that for you that I can add to your show notes if you want. But really, you just go in, you tell it what you do, and it breaks your job down into a large list of tasks that you probably do every day within your job, because we all have a job, but our jobs are really just bundles of lots of different tasks. Everyone's job looks a little bit different, but if you can unbundle that into 15, 16 core things that you do, the GPT I'll share with you breaks it down into how much of that AI could help with in each task. But really, the second step then is to look at that list and say, okay, what absolutely needs to be remaining human? For example, you wouldn't send your digital avatar to interview me in person. This needs to be human, right? But there might be other things that AI can help with, or some things that AI can assist with for 20%. So kind of identifying, weeding through that list. What do I like the least about what I do? How can AI help me with it? And then looking at some of the tools that are out there, or talking to someone like me, finding out, hey, I have this to do. How can AI help me? Or going to ChatGPT and saying, I have this thing to do. How can you help me? Asking AI how it can help you. And then really just using it and experimenting with it and figuring out where the limitations are and how you can ask questions better or differently. And then just committing to ongoing learning and evaluation of being curious. That really is the best way to get good at using AI, is to be curious, because it doesn't work the same all the time. It's really, really interesting. You just have to spend the time.
And it's interesting because it's kind of like going through Alice in Wonderland. Okay, we're going to go down that rabbit hole right away. And as you were talking there, and I'm thinking mental health. So women, men, all over the world. And now here's asking ChatGPT, because you can now have that conversation with, like you said, you were going for a run, and this opens up. And then all of a sudden now it's like I get to have that conversation. I get to deep dive a question that I don't have, and then go down that hole. So talking about mental health, how does that, and you've probably seen it and had a lot of people talk about with AI and mental health.
It's a loaded question because on the one hand, there are a few AI tools. There's one called Pi AI, PI, that was really, really ethically well trained, and it's designed to be a personal intelligence companion. It's very friendly and conversational, and it's wonderful to talk to. And on the one hand, you think, oh, if every lonely person in the world had someone to talk to, that would be great. A licensed therapist down the road, on demand, 24/7. That would be amazing. But then on the other side, you think, okay, well, one of the limitations of a large language model like ChatGPT or Pi is that they make mistakes sometimes. They hallucinate, we call it, which means they make things up. They give information that's not really there. They invent things. And so I don't know that we can fully trust them to give people mental health advice, because that's really could have dire consequences. And then we have to consider the implications on the profession of mental health professionals. We don't have enough, but we want to make sure that whenever possible, people are interacting with people. And how do we prioritize that? And how do we balance those things?
So right now, you're in obviously an AI variant, and you're being hired out there as a speaker. And I thought, what is your main topic? And I know it's AI, obviously, but can we deep dive a little bit into the actual? You've been hired to go out there because you started at zero. They've now thrown you into, we need an expert, and you're considered the expert in this across Canada and the United States.
I don't know if anyone can even be an expert at this. It's moving so fast, but I like to try and help people where I can. Really, what I do, depending on the group, depending on what their needs are, any given group, there's a wide variety of already baseline AI literacy, people who've heard of it, people who've not heard of it, and feelings about it, right? People who are terrified, people who are worried about the future of their job, people who have only seen Terminator, people who love it. And so really just making sure we establish a baseline of AI literacy to get everybody on the same page of here's what it is and how it works and what the limitations are. AI harm can be caused by limitations of the system, which it has embedded bias and it hallucinates. But then on the other hand, people who are using it, we call them bad actors, people who are using it to do bad things. So making sure people fundamentally understand that that's the landscape. I'll show them where we are for the most amazing song generators that can generate song instantly, where we are for AI video, where we are for podcast, and all of these amazing tools so they can have a landscape scan. And then we dive into specifically their sector. Sometimes it's education, sometimes it's business, sometimes it's human resources, whichever group I'm working with. And we identify what the pain points for them specifically are in their sector and how AI might be able to assist with some of those specific pain points for their business or for their industry, and making sure that they're moving forward in an ethical way and know where the limitations are, where the landmines are on this journey. And the goal is that by the end of a session, they'll feel empowered to move forward with confidence, kind of having a better lay of the land.
So now you're doing public speaking and you're going in. I'm going to do a shift on this, and I'm going to get into the business side of it. How have you found the business side of basically doing talks with AI, because it's very specialized, okay? And now you're in it. And how is the business model approach for you? Are you introducing AI to help you through it, or other things for growth strategy for your business?
I use AI as a partner in everything that I do, but I generate a new presentation that I hand design, that I hand map, that I write everything for every group that I build for. But then I'll use it exactly the way that I tell people to use it. I use a very specialized program to help me identify what the issues are in a particular sector, right? Because if I'm going in to talk to a group that is a human resource sector, I don't necessarily have a deep and nuanced understanding of what they're going through. So there's specific AI tools that I'll pull most recent podcasts for this sector and news articles and give them all to an AI tool to help me identify what the themes are and the common challenges are. And then I'll start thinking through different approaches to help solve those problems and specific tools that might be able to help, using AI as a sounding board, but then ultimately curating my own final approach for how they could be integrated, and doing some fact checking on my own, because everything needs to be fact checked. And then usually having a touch base with somebody in the organization to make sure I'm on the right page. So I use AI as a thought partner, but not to replace really anything I'm doing. I don't use it for any of the design that I do. Just again, I have a background in that, and I still want it to be very human focused. And I'm sure that someone like me who works in AI, the question is always if I write any of my own stuff or if I have AI do everything for me. But I enjoy the process still. But if AI can help me go deeper and do a better job at some of those things, then I'll use them.
Where do you see AI or that whole aspect in the next 10 years? Not 5. I'm going 10. So we're on the hockey stick curve right now. We're going up. So if you look at evolution and where we're at, and you talked about the internet. We talked about the steam, power steam going from there. And you see where our peaks and valleys. And now we're at that.
It's a tough question. I look at where we were 10 years ago in 2014, and just so much can change. I think everything will be completely different.
Because of new jobs and like robot, like with Elon Musk, with what's happening with that part of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about that it's going to take a lot of jobs away. Okay. But it's kind of like, and I look at it the same thing. It's the things you know that you don't know. Is it going to take jobs away? You bet. But what are the jobs we don't know that are going to be created from this? Because we don't know those jobs yet.
Yeah. A perfect example that I like to think about is back when my kids were little in the early 2000s, we had film cameras and we would take photos and we'd take our film in to be developed. And there was a whole industry built around these like cameras. And then suddenly we have phones and nobody's printing pictures. And so that whole industry, I'm sure there was a lot of jobs lost in that industry. Professional photographers thrived, obviously, still a need. Or the phones, let's say people who worked in the telecom industry, dial-up phones, the women who used to plug phones manually, cords, and connect calls. But look at where we've come with telecom and how many jobs there are in the telecom industry. Back when all those women were laid off in the 50s from being telephone operators, it was one of the most massive layoffs of female workers in the history of the world. But now that telecom industry is enormous. There's just new types of jobs we could have never imagined back then. And so I think things will change. I think everyone needs to know that what our jobs currently look like are going to change, but they have changed already since 10 years ago and 10 years before that, right? Internet, email, Zoom, we're always evolving. And there are a lot of different schools of thought on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether we as humans are designed to work ourselves to death and maybe having a little less. But the truth is we're in this messy middle and we just don't know. And it'll become clear as it becomes clear, but we just need to make sure we're trying to lead ethically and safeguard what we can and what's important and be vigilant as we move forward. And that's really going to be the key of what it looks like in 10 years, I think.
And you're totally right, because being ethical and everything that we're doing, especially with AI, has to be this top and foremost in people's eyes about, is this ethical? And can we move forward with that? Because fake news, everything where we're at and all of that. Do you know what? Rebecca, that was awesome. Thank you very much. Is there any last words that you want to talk about or say before we head off to AI land?
I think I'll just say this. I think I would just encourage anyone who's curious about AI to learn about it. But one of my favorite childhood books was a book called Horton Hears a Who. And it's a Dr. Seuss book. And it's about an elephant who finds a speck and he puts it on a flower, and there's a whole civilization of people who live on the speck. And he's trying to tell everyone around him that there's a whole civilization here, but nobody can hear them, nobody can see them, so they don't care about them. And everyone on this speck is yelling, we are here, but nobody can hear them. And finally, they find one little girl who's not participating in this little chant on the speck. And as soon as she adds her voice, everyone can hear her. And I think that we as a society, everything is being run by big tech companies who understand this and we don't. And the more of us that can understand this technology and advocate for regulation and ethical AI adoption and join our voices together, there's a better chance that we'll be heard and can build the future that we want and be more in control of what it looks like in 10 years. But it's going to be a collective effort. And so I just encourage people to learn as much as you can, go in optimistic, but with your eyes open, and then join your voice to advocate for ethical change.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Now, do you have, because we usually do this, we've asked our listeners if they have a question for me while we're talking about AI. Do you have any questions for me? Because you've done your research on me and then on the AI stuff as well. Do you have any questions?
I think looking back over your career, at the beginning of your career, let's say, how do you think things would have been different if these kind of AI tools were available to you back then?
Ooh, I think back then, if they were available, I probably wouldn't have used them. I would have been more afraid of them than actually using them. I would have gone into a different direction versus curiosity. It would have been, yeah, that's kind of cool. This is where it is, versus all of a sudden now, being older, wiser, in tune with myself, is that now I can ask better questions. Back then, I would never have asked myself that question. It would be just another phase. It's okay. So it would have been a big miss.
So as someone who's experimented with it then, what advice would you give to your listeners about AI?
Oh, from when you talk the AI Oreo strategy, create yourself curiosity and ask yourself better questions. Ask AI a better question and always ask another question. And yes, you're going to go down that rabbit hole, but all of a sudden your Pandora box, now you've just really opened it up, and now you are there, you're present, and it's like, you know, things that you didn't know. So it creates that curiosity, that the wow factor. You mean, I get information like right now. I find it's better than Google. Like it's like, holy crow. If I only knew what I know today, which I'll know the next 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
But it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you know. Shed Talk.